There's something shameful about losing things before your time. When you're older, they might just say, "She's just old." What about when you're younger? I'm 28. How about you? I woke up one morning without any of my teeth, and a sore feeling across my skull, thick and sick. Until later, I blamed it on however I'd suddenly lost my teeth. Black market shit. Some psycho with a tooth fetish. I don't know. There were 0 traces of blood on my pillows or sheets. No blood in my mouth. Certainly, no traces of my teeth. But as I ran my tongue along those grooves where teeth used to be, a scream ruptured out from deep inside. Doctors were confused. They were mostly confused about why I hadn't come in earlier. On the face of it, my teeth had been long gone. No signs of surgery. They asked me about my hygiene. As the first toothless mouth wore on, and I began to wear in my first set of dentures, I started to have these painful migraines. Felt like stuff around me was different each time it happened. Small things, like a water bottle that was an inch to the left, or my favorite tea tasting like the rust of an automotive shop I used to work in. I was hoping it was just the dentures or related to how my teeth had been taken. They scanned my brain and found something inside it, but not before the magnetic field of their MRI was disrupted. They had to employ CT scanning instead. Whatever the object was, it was metal, and it happened to be the exact dimensions of a nickel. More than ever, the doctors were pointing fingers in my direction. My other tests didn't show any major health problems. What had I done to cause my teeth to fall out? What had I done to cause this nickel or nickel-like object to be in my brain? They were dumbfounded. They wanted to set me up with a shrink, but I was low on money. In the red, really. Seeing as how I worked multiple part-time gigs and didn't have the insurance full-timers got. I limped out the doctor's office without another look back. I had a pillar of salt in my eyes, and a secret behind them. Because there was another reason I didn't want to see a shrink. I remembered. Almost like a dream or sleep paralysis, but my senses told me neither of those. A figure bedside with wings of light on either end of them. It was like I'd been under anesthesia to get my wisdom teeth taken out, but then had come out of it a little at some point. That, and they'd taken more than just my wisdom teeth. Wings of light. The idea it might be the tooth fairy pounded up from my childhood. Like a thing kept in a box angrier for it. Pounded as against muscles, blood vessels, and nerves. They say the brain doesn't feel, but those structures around it certainly can and do. But, supposing, instantly, it was real. Why had the tooth fairy come back after all this time to take every last one of my adult teeth? Like many do, I swam to the shared blood of online message boards, ignoring the advice of lifeguards to seek professional help. I tried that as long as I could. That's where I met Stacy and Francis, who said they were young and toothless too. The young and the toothless, we started calling ourselves, looking for others who'd experienced something similar, who were just as restless. One day, you have all your teeth. The next day, you wake up and they're all gone. The following weeks, the migraines start. Stacy had ventured far into medical help, landing in much deeper waters than healthcare could provide. Francis was considerably tighter on money than myself. Neither Stacy nor Francis had come out of the anesthesia or whatever it was. But when I mentioned the wings of light over some beers at a cheap motel where we'd gotten together, they didn't laugh me down from that ledge either. Probably it's not the wisest thing to meet up with strangers you barely know from online, but when you're all young and toothless, and with something like a nickel in the brain besides, you might find such cautionary morals pedantic. Getting a motel together? Now, that's even more unusual for relative strangers. It was as though we signed up for some toothless, nickel-brain threesome. The way I saw it, if one of them slashed my throat, it was less meals I'd have to gnaw with dentures. Stacy had just turned 30. Francis was 3 years younger than me. They were both good-looking enough. Sans the teeth, or lack thereof. Like a secret knock, when we met up in the desolate lobby, each person had taken out their teeth, not where anyone but us could see it. Later, in our motel room, Stacy whistled over her empty beer bottle with a flaccid mouth. Francis picked up his dentures like they were real teeth. They looked even faker than mine. Wings of light? Huh? Francis said. I didn't want to tell you on Discord or over the phone. I said, because then you might not come. Shucks, Stacy said. Well, then why are we here? Because I have an idea, and the longer we wait to get to know each other, the less chance we might have to try it. I've procured teeth. Lots of them. Dentists in training use them, along with designers of dental equipment. Guess it comes with the territory of working tons of shitty, glancing over the fence at greener grass part-time gigs. But I was able to get them basically for free from someone I worked under a few years ago. Stacy stood up from the couch and began to pace around. She paused to push a skewed print painting back into place, like she had OCD or something. Francis hung his head lopsided like that cheap painting had been, hands on his cheeks. Okay, Stacy said. So we're here to assume it was the Tooth Fairy herself and not some black market deal? You don't have to do this with me, I said. I'm going to put those teeth under all the pillows in this motel room tonight, and then see what we can lure in. Might be nothing, but it's worth a shot. But we didn't have any teeth under our pillows, Francis said. Our teeth were taken directly out of our mouths. The wings of light, I said, and the teeth. They meant something to me before I had a clear memory of connection. What if the Tooth Fairy myth is based on something real? Maybe we're usually out cold, where some kind of gas or pheromone puts us under. It was only our mothers and fathers giving us the money, Francis said. Could be, I said. Or it could be they were out too, and then led to believe with some hypno mumbo jumbo or other what the Tooth Fairy wanted them to believe. That's crazy as hell, Stacy said. What about the nickel that ended up in our brains? Francis was so hunched down with his arms as folded as they could be that he looked like a poster boy for self-soothing behavior, as those YouTube shrinks called it. A nickel for a tooth? Stacy shook her head. That's like the money you'd get in another era. I always got $5, minimum. Spoiled? Francis said. What if it isn't a nickel? I said. What if it isn't money at all? Our case could be special, Francis said. Why target us though? I can't believe you're willing to drink whatever Kool-Aid this is, Stacy said. but she came around to sit next to him again, facing me. "Worth a shot," I said. "Then we go back to saner stuff, or find a better way to catch whatever did this." "What is the Tooth Fairy going to do?" Stacy said. "Wave her magic wand over us and return all our teeth?" "Something like that," I said. "That, or we take hers." "How do we wake up?" Frances said, "Assuming she puts us out." I fished into my pocket for a bottle of pills, held it up, and rattled them. "Flamazanil," I said. "It counteracts sedation." Got it from another of my old work acquaintances. "Since you've wrangled us here," Stacy said, "go ahead and give me a rundown of the side effects of that drug." Francis stuck out his tongue, his dentures joggling around. "Oh yeah," I said. "One more thing. I brought a big old bag of rusty tools. They're not dental grade." I started to go under, but then I came out of it, head bobbing above the surface of my unconscious. I could feel the old dead teeth from my dentist friend mounted beneath my own pillow, and I could turn my head just enough to glimpse Francis and Stacy still dozing beside me. Bright light tried to bleed into the thick motel curtains. In an ordinary bedroom, the light coming from the outdoors would be so bright as to appear like wings beside the tall shape otherwise blocking out the radiance. It was very tall with a very large head, great big eyes, gray. "Fucking alien," I tried to say. My words came out slobbered. It tilted its swollen cranium towards me. Its mouth opened slightly. I did not see any teeth within. Beneath the sheets, I was squeezing my hand into a fist. I let my nails dig into my palm, further waking me. I was able to sit up. Francis and Stacy were still out cold. The flamazanil had not worked on them. If what the alien used was anything like the anesthetics, whether drifting in by some gas or some kind of aura, I did see something, like a thin mist, in the air. The gray turned its nude backside to me as if to leave. One long arm reaching towards the door. "Fuck you," I said. "Fucking alien coward." It turned slowly back around. I could just make out its mouth moving in the dark. Again, no flash of teeth. Then the gray darted around the bed. I barely had time to think about what it was doing before it slung a 3-fingered grip around my neck and began to choke. It leaned in close, its breath smelling of cesspools radiated by dead stars. I fumbled between myself and Francis for the bag of tools, while Francis and Stacy slumbered. When it put its other 3-fingered hand around my neck, applying even more pressure, a deeper dark crept into my vision. I bit my lip, trying to force myself from succumbing. Blood wet my palate. My gums gnawed. My head pulsed. I could feel another migraine coming on. Francis must have turned over in his sleep, because the bag of rusty tools was closer now, just under my jerking hands. I grabbed a battery-operated drill gun and very soon went to work. A 3/4 inch drill bit hiccuped and whirred and spat until it was all the way in that prodigious-sized head. Large eyes filled with oil-colored blood. It coughed some out onto my face. The long alien fingers around my neck went slack. As I struggled to get the dead creature off me, the large motel room window shattered. Light ripped into our room as 3 more grays stepped over the windowsill and inside. They were too pissed to bother any longer with the door, it seemed. Now they brought tools of their own, of the weapon variety. Lethal-looking knives. No ray guns or anything of the like. Maybe they meant to dissect us on the spot. But I got up, held up my hands. The pain of that headache that was coming on reached its crescendo. I'd been somewhat numb to it, as the gray had been choking me out. The world around me started to change, but this time, it was more than a water bottle or paper bowl being in a different position, or something tasting funny. The room shook. Sleeping Francis and Stacy wobbled in the bed. Those 3 aliens that had come in through the broken window flew back like they were in a gale. Their lanky bodies ate sky. Up and up they went. Where it stopped, no one, the least of which me, can know. But eventually, I did hear their bodies hit the ground after falling from some height. About a minute later, and the light outside, which I can only assume was their ship, was gone. I'll tell you like I told the others. I'm not sure where any of the bodies went. Once I could wake up Francis and Stacy, we left that motel in such a hurry that I don't know what became of the gray in our room. But outside, there wasn't a trace of the grays that had fallen to what should have been their deaths. Maybe they didn't die. I don't know. I do think we have more of an idea what they put inside us. Not merely tracking devices, but weapons. Something to unlock hidden potential in the human brain, maybe. As for their thing with teeth, your guess is as good as mine. Here's my guess. DNA. My dad is obsessed with Google devices, and I mean obsessed. I grew up in a fairly small house. Sure, it was 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, but it was small enough that if you were talking to someone upstairs, you could usually hear them from the downstairs. Unfortunately, the Google devices are no exception to this rule. There are so many Google devices in our home. If you say, "Hey Google," to the hub in the kitchen, the one in the living room will pick it up. Before you know it, you're talking to 2 Googles simultaneously. And although it was funny the first few times, it became quite annoying very quickly. My dad is so obsessed with Google Home setup that he has wired Google to control our living room lights. And the lock on our door is also automated by a smartphone app. I have since moved away from my childhood home, so of course, I don't have this app installed on my own phone. Now, every time I go home, I need to be accompanied by someone with the app to let me into the house. Or else I'm forced to resort to knocking on the door to alert someone to let me in. However, I love my dad, and we've all accepted these minor annoyances as one of his quirks. I thought this quirky love of technology was harmless, until now. I don't visit the home often enough to download the app onto my phone, so I have no way of entering the house without the app. This week, when I returned for a visit, I had to resign myself to the tedious business of waiting for someone else to open the door for me every time I needed to enter our house. Matters were made even worse when my dad had his phone stolen earlier in the week, and my mom was the only one left with the app installed on her device, effectively making her the gatekeeper to our house. Of course, my dad assured us that he had deactivated the app on his phone remotely when it had gone missing. Now, I wish I had taken his word for granted. It happened late in the night. I was sprawled in my bed, scrolling mindlessly and sleepily on my phone, when I heard something quite odd at around 1 in the morning. Clunk, clunk, clunk. It seemed to be coming from downstairs. Initially, I thought of my old dog, Pepper. Great, I thought, drowsily. She must be getting into the garbage again. It was only after the clunky noise commenced a second time that I fully awoke from my sleep-fogged brain and remembered that our dog had passed away about a year ago. I had been conditioned as a child to expect that every noise originated from downstairs in the middle of the night had come from our dog. But now that was impossible. Clunk, clunk, clunk. The noises were uniform in both length and volume, methodical, rigid, and unyielding. I strained against the silence for another minute, listening for the sound in the darkness of my room. I stared apprehensively into the inky blackness, my phone screen now blank and silent. Clunk, clunk, clunk. By now, my heart was beating a little faster. I tried to rationalize the noise, running through options like, it must be the pipes, and raccoons fight outside our house all the time. But if I was being honest with myself, none of my rationalizations could truly explain the persistence of the noise. Clunk, clunk, clunk. There was a strange rhythm, an undeniable purpose that resonated from the restless sound. There was no denying it any longer. This was coming from our side door. Someone, or something, was playing with the locking device. When I came to this realization, my breath caught in my throat, and my heart stuttered like a butterfly suddenly caught in a gust of cold wind. Someone was trying to get into our house. Someone who kept trying, but couldn't understand that what they were doing wasn't working. That thought was somehow even more frightening than the alternative. This person was attempting the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. No sane or rational human being would reach that conclusion after trying to get in so many times. And not only was this person attempting to break into our house at 1 a.m, they weren't going to give up anytime soon. And again, clunk, clunk, clunk. By now, I knew that I had to take some sort of action. I am embarrassed to say that I did not feel comfortable leaving my room, so I resorted to using the technology I had on hand. My phone. Shakily in my panic, I dialed my dad's number and waited for him to pick up. I took shallow breaths as I waited for his cell phone to go through. When the phone started ringing from my end, I expected to hear it buzzing or ringing in my parents' room just down the hall. I had a brief and bizarre moment of amusement when I thought of the benefits of a smaller house with thin walls, and how this might come in handy for once. However, when I heard the phone finally ringing, my blood ran cold. I had completely forgotten my dad's phone had been stolen. The phone was ringing from outside the house, directly on the other side of the side door. There was a pause, and then the ringing stopped abruptly. I held my breath and listened intensely, my hand shaking as I held my own now silent phone. Minutes seemed to pass. Clunk, clunk, click.
The story of my downfall began with a doorbell and a trio of uninvited guests. I clearly remember that Sunday morning when 3 men arrived at my door, wearing black polo shirts with a small red N on them. I've also noticed a branded truck parked on the street, and it kinda surprised me. I had no idea Netflix had those. Anyways, the visitors briefly introduced themselves, but now I can't recall their names, even if my life depended on it. But that doesn't really matter. You'll understand why later. What I remember about our conversation is how bizarre it was. They stated that I was chosen as a candidate for their regional research campaign on viewer habits and perception. Sounded lame, so I was about to close the door in their faces with a hard pass. But one thing stopped me. The company is willing to pay $100 for each day of participation, the guy said, and I was calculating things in my mind by the time he finished that sentence. So, yeah, I've asked them in and we discussed the details. At first, I was mostly skeptical about the whole shady deal. Who on earth would pay that much for basically lying on your couch and watching stupid shows? But as the company representatives explained the whole thing, soon enough it became clear that the whole thing is dead serious. The research would last for at least 6 months, and there was a great probability that it could get extension period if the results show potential. I would be expected to watch anything I like on the platform for at least 3 hours a day, and at this point, it would stress multiple times that the number is mandatory and skipping or slacking would not be tolerated. The patented eye motion detected device would be installed by my TV or desktop screen. My choice, to track and submit my sight focus on the screen. I've asked all sorts of questions that I could come up with, trying to check for second bottom or tiny text paragraphs, but there were none of the flaws I could imagine. With offers like this, you could expect some fraud scenarios where you end up owing money for breaking some agreement point you were too lazy to read through or simply misunderstood. But this one was clear as sky. I skip a day, my role in project is terminated. No hard feelings. Besides, those were some good money. $3,000 for watching comedy shows every day. Yes, please. So I've accepted their offer. Next week, I was supposed to get a full body exam and make sure I have no health issues that would alter my experience during the research period. So I got one, and soon enough the results came in stating that everything is okay, so I could proceed. Next thing, set up an installation. The van stopped by on a Friday and a couple tech guys set up a special version of Netflix app on my TV and synchronized the tracking device with it. The thing looked just like a black indoor camera, the one that you get if you want to check out your cats while you're away. Technicians explained how it works. If I see the green light flashing, it means that my eye focus is correct. If it's red, I'm looking away from the screen. They also assured me that this thing is unable to capture video, so I shouldn't have to worry about my privacy or anything. Yeah, right, I said to myself, as I've decided that I'd better not feel too relaxed around this thing. Lastly, on Sunday, the original trio paid me a visit and we signed the papers and I got my credentials for the test account. It came in a stylish black envelope with the same red N at the corner. The research should have started next day, on Monday, but as we shook hands, I walked them out of my apartment. I've decided to log in and have a sneak peek of the whole thing. There was absolutely no difference between regular and research accounts. Same login screen, same options. The paper with my login and password information was a wild mix of letters, numbers, and symbols. As I've put them in and made it through the form screen, I was greeted by the home section interface. My username was set to Watcher032, and there was also a timer underneath it, which I soon understood counted the time to a research start. That was pretty much it. Nothing special, so I quickly lost interest. Next day, after the regular day at my job, I sat down on the couch with a bottle of soda and a pack of chips. ready to earn some real money. Somewhere deep inside, I still thought that the whole thing is not serious, and that if I will get at least $500 a month, it will be a win-win situation. That day I've decided to start rewatching The Office. What a show. As I fired it up, I checked the tracking thing. It was gleaming with a greenish light that turned red the very same moment I've looked at it directly. So, no problems here. Good, I thought. And the other thing I've noticed? There was a thin stripe at the bottom of the screen that was barely visible when I've started and gradually filled from left to right, changing color from red to orange to yellow to green, and I got the idea that it represented my duty time for the day. Indeed, as I've hit the 3-hour mark, it flashed a couple of times and disappeared as if saying, "Your job here is done. See you tomorrow." But one can't get enough of The Office. That simple. So I've sat there some more, finishing my drink and eating all the snacks. Next day, the story repeated itself. And the next. And you know what's great? Each morning, as I've checked my bank account, the sum there went up with a fresh 100 lying on top of my shameless small pile of savings. Soon enough, I got the full taste of my new life as a lab rat. I had money. I could quit my job if I wanted. I hated it there and the pay was low. So I did. Now my day belonged just to me, so I could do stuff. Go have breakfast in that place across town instead of choking with a granola bar on my way to the office. Sure. Go wander in the vinyl record store instead of a boring-ass meeting. Yes, please. My new job was not demanding at all. No reports, no forms, no calls. Just be there and have fun for 3 hours. Or more. Do you know how many great shows are on Netflix? I was basically living the dream. I have even stopped my clumsy attempts with cooking. Why would I cook if I could just order? Of course, if you're from New York, LA, or any other large city, you're probably cracking a smile on a guy who gets $3,000 per month and acts as if he's the king of the world. But luckily for me, I live in a small rural town. Couple of weeks later, there was a storm and electricity went down. I didn't notice that as I was sleeping late, so the phone call woke me up. Mr. Grayson, we are aware of the problem. The issue will be fixed in shortest term possible. Feel free to continue as soon as things go back to normal. The voice in the speaker said, and I had to get myself a good old mug of coffee to understand that was somebody from Netflix. Yet indeed, 3 hours later, the light was on again. So that evening, I could return to watching stuff. As the calendar marked 3 months since experiment start, I've got another uninvited guest. This time, it was a doctor, who introduced himself as Dr. Kowalski. I've remembered the name, as one of my grandmothers was Polish. He explained that I should go through a general checkup to see if anything changed with my health during the past months of the research routine. So a flashlight to my eye, that horrible doctor thing to my ear, temperature measured, and he went away satisfied. And so, it would continue for more boring pages describing me putting the money to trash and building symbiotic relationship with my couch. If I'd not meet the worst enemy of the man, boredom. After 4 months from the start of the research, I've watched everything I had in my backlog and had no time for when I had a regular job. By the end of the 5th, everything that looked more or less interesting to my eye, but was not good enough to binge earlier,
Half a year later, I've watched all the things at the bottom of the sci-fi and fantasy section, and by the end of the year, I was just sitting there, watching Brazilian soap operas and cooking shows, and that goddamn tracker was as if winking at me with red light each time I've decided to look away at my phone, or just at the wall behind the TV. I was literally bored to death there. I was dying inside, bit by bit. But hey, money makes the world go round, and I know no better way to get some in a more stylish and convenient way. So there I was every day, sitting at my couch with my eyes glued to the armored troubles of Señorita Velquez, or whatever her name was. I've tried to overcompensate my boredom with new things. I bought a bunch of new trendy clothes, had a pretty expensive haircut, bought myself a PS5, and all the variety of beer I could find in my town. It didn't help much. It still felt as if something was sucking me out dry day by day, and God no, I'm not speaking about a creepy life force sucking program or anything. It was boredom that, just in the manner of the Chinese water torture, drove me crazy 3 hours per day. It all ended in one night. That day I turned the TV on late, around 8:45, and picked some documentary about forging and ironworks. But then the unexpected thing happened. I woke up. Realizing that I woke up, meaning that I fell asleep, I rushed and checked the clock. It was 1:11 in the morning. I've turned on the TV, as it automatically went to sleep mode due to stupid automatic switch off timer. Green planet my ass. As Netflix loaded, there was a black pop-up screen saying just one thing: Watcher 32, account suspended. Returning to login screen in 10, 9. Oh shit. I messed up. I messed up bad. I should call them and explain that it's not my fault, that something happened. I need to come up with something, I said to myself as I opened the Netflix support on my phone. Yes, hello? This is Jack Grayson, the Watcher 32. There was a terrible incident with the tracking device. I'm sorry, who? The voice on the other end replied, Jack Grayson. I'm in your research group for habits, or how is it called? My tracking device. I've insisted. I'm sorry, Mr. Grayson? What research group are you talking about? I'm afraid I am not familiar with anything like that. What tracking device are you referring to? The voice said, the one for the eye movement detection. It's broken. That's why I failed the duty today. I didn't lose hope. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with the subject. I will contact my superiors and we will get down to this. Please expect a call from us in a couple of days. Is there anything else I could do for you? The talk ended on that no. And no, I've never received the call, or an email, or anything. I didn't attempt to contact those superiors myself. But as I shouted to my speaker about research group and tracking devices, people back there had absolutely no idea of what the hell was going on. Soon enough, my phone number got blacklisted. I blame myself. Should be more patient in my expressions. The income was gone. I didn't receive a cent from them since the night of my stupid nap. They never picked up the tracking device, so it's still somewhere in my apartment collecting dust. I had to find another job to maintain myself. Sure, I had some leftover money. I'm not that stupid to spend everything at once. But according to my calculations, if I would tighten my belt and try to survive on it, I'd have enough for 4 to 5 months before I'm out.
so it's better sooner than later, and I went to be an office clerk again. And I really wish this was the end of the story. I would post it somewhere so people would confront me, and I'd get to feel a bit better. But that was just the beginning of the nightmare my life turned into. For the whole month after our partnership break, it was all the same. Except you couldn't possibly sit me down in front of the TV and ask to watch something together. No sir. But one day I woke up with this strange feeling as if I was lying in a dark room with my eyes closed. But somebody switched on a powerful lamp above, and some light is breaking through the skin of my closed eyelids. It was an uncomfortable sensation, which could be unexpected sunshine breaking through the clouds. But the thing was, I am always asleep with the blinds down, so no light comes through my window. That was strange, but I didn't give it proper attention. Next episode happened at work. I was speaking to one of my colleagues and suddenly noticed that her pupils and hair had a touch of ash gray color. I asked if she dyed her hair or something, but she just stared back at me, laughed, and said, "No." And just weeks later, I remembered both of those incidents, and I've started to lose my sight. No, not like that. Even quite the opposite. How should I explain this? I've developed a rare condition, being unable to see the black spectrum completely. Generally speaking, I see those things that should be black, in bright white color. Of course, I went through countless Oculus examinations, some scanning and blood analysis. At some point, they even punctured the corner of my eyeball with a needle and took a probe of the tissue. It actually sounds worse than it is, really. But in the end, there was no explanation to my condition. Probably some rare mutation or degeneration of seeing nerve. Nobody could tell. I went practically blind. At first, it was more or less fine, much like walking through a winter forest in July. But as my disease progressed, my whole world became white as light of a million suns. White was emanating so intense that I couldn't see shapes anymore, just the smudges of color on a great plain of white nothing. The worst thing was sleeping. Each time my eyes closed, my head exploded. Have you ever heard of people going crazy, being left in snow deserts? It felt the same for me. As soon as my eyelashes touched, I got surrounded with agony of being trapped in a supernova. So I had to sleep with the warm yellow light on and my eyes open. That was hard to achieve, but I had no other option. I got a trained dog and a social worker to come check on me from time to time. Bring food and all. I see them both more like moving outlines, rather than living beings. You would probably get terrified if you see my computer setup as I type this. The page background is pink and I print on it with yellow letters. It's a poor contrast, but it's the best visible combination of colors for me to see it. I blame those Netflix scientists and their stupid research activities. You might say that I'm just pitying myself and looking for a scapegoat, but trust me, I don't. Last week, I started to see the color black again. Well, sort of. I've suddenly realized that I see a thin line of black, as if the crack on an eggshell in the corner of my eye as I've blinked, and the wave of white flooded my vision. It was just like one of those tiny black floaters that you remember flying right before your eyes from time to time. I closed my eyes, ignoring the pain to give it a better look. Yes,
Indeed, it was there at the edge of my sight. Then, day later, it grew bigger, then bigger again and branched. And then the sounds appeared. As I closed my eyes, I could hear a barely audible sizzling sound, as if somebody spilled a couple of drops of water on a dry hot pan. It ends as soon as I opened my eyelids. Soon enough, it all turned to a spiderweb of cracks and hissing sounds that won't go away. I try not to blink anymore, but it's hard. Each time I do, I see it. I see it inside my head. The white crumbles, revealing something horrible nested inside of me. The horrible sounds as if that thing is asking to feed it. I can't control it anymore. I'm afraid that soon it'll get strong enough to hatch. Sometimes, the tiny text paragraphs appear written in blood. The crawlers aren't real. That's the first thing you need to understand, just in case it starts to affect you before you reach the end of this post. The crawlers aren't real, and you must hold on to that thought. No matter what your senses tell you, the crawlers are not real. We are at the start of a public health emergency, and absolutely no one wants to talk about it. Not the state health department, not the CDC, not even the American Psychiatric Association. That last one is what hurts the most. You see, I'm a psychiatrist in a state mental hospital. The patients I treat are generally people who can't function in daily life due to mental illness. Such individuals usually have a wide range of issues, from PTSD to schizophrenia. That's why this last week has been so strange. We've had 15 new patients, more than triple what we're used to in this small hospital, and 13 of them show the same pathologies. They speak of inhuman figures that approach by crawling along walls and ceilings, seeking to do them harm. The hallucinations appear to be both vivid and realistic. Each patient describes how they can see, hear, smell, and even feel these creeping things. Their reactions, such as shrieking and cowering in a corner, also suggest that the hallucination appears to be physically real from the point of view of these patients. And therein lies the danger. Not in these nightmarish hallucinations, but rather in each individual's reaction to them. One young man jumped off an 8-foot floor balcony. Another middle-aged woman stabbed a meat skewer through her eye socket. Those are just two examples of the lengths people will go as they try to escape these things that they believe are pursuing them. Furthermore, I'm confident that hundreds of cases of this particular psychosis are going undiagnosed. Although we don't yet have the final data, information from the state health department indicates a dramatic increase in suicide over the past month, an increase of 510% compared to last month's data. So where does that leave us? What I'm about to propose next may seem shocking, even unprecedented, but I ask you to keep an open mind and consider documented events such as dancing plague that affected Europe in the 16th century. I base this claim firstly on the psychopathology. Each patient's description of the stalking creature and their reaction to it are virtually identical in each case. Secondly, the testimonies of the patients themselves suggest that the hallucination is in some sense of transmissible. I'll explain further below. A university student described how a friend pounded on her door shortly after midnight, begging to be let in because something was chasing her. She hid immediately beneath the bed, but the student in question saw nothing in the hallway at first. After failing to get anything but gibberish from her friend, she left her room to seek help from the authorities. It was then she claimed to see a horrible gray thing moving along the ceiling, opening its jaws to devour me. The university student and her friend were admitted last night as Case 12 and Case 11, respectively. Case 11's attempt at suicide have thus far been thwarted. Case 12 was not as fortunate. The delusion appears to completely ignore divisions of class, race, age, health, and lifestyle. As evident by Case 8, an 81-year-old man whose background could not be more different than that of Case 11 and 12. Case 8, prior to being ingressed, was housebound due to obesity and other health issues. Reported how one by one his family members were afflicted. First, his granddaughter never came back from buying groceries. Then his daughter vanished while on a walk. And finally his son disappeared while searching for the other two. Case 8 waited, a prisoner in his armchair, until he saw a god-awful shadow silhouetted in the streetlight. According to Case 8, the thing slithered under the door and came for him, and that's how he was found, screaming and tried to drag his bulk along the floor. Authorities have thus far been unable to locate the missing family members. In Case 11 and 12, the delusion appears to have been passed between the two individuals in contact with each other. As with the flu, in Case 8, however, we see that it appeared in an entire family, like a genetic disorder. Yet surely none is stranger than that of Case 5, a night security guard at a shopping center. Case 5 was brought to us after he ran crying into traffic and was declared too agitated for normal hospitalization. In Case 5, the hallucinations appear to have begun of their own accord, without any prior contact or family history. The individual was simply performing his duties, walking through the empty mall with a large flashlight, when he began to notice movement in the corner of his vision. The following is a transcription of Case 5's words while he was being transported from the hospital to our facility by ambulance. "They've lost my scent for now. Thank God. Where was I? Right, the mall. It was easy to dismiss at first. A claw disappearing around a corner. A shadow that sorta looked like some starving hunched over thing disappearing into a rack of clothes. It was always creepy in there, but I was used to it. Just figured my eyes was playing tricks. But the longer I walked, the more I saw, until it was right in front of me. You can't even imagine the way it just hung from the ceiling tiles like a damn cave cricket. The skittering sound and that reeking smell. You can't think of anything else except that you're gonna wind up in its belly. I ran fast as I could, and it was right behind me the whole way, like it could have taken me at any time and was just trolling with me. I think I felt it brush the back of my neck a few times, just to hear me scream. When I ran out into the traffic, I wasn't even thinking. I didn't even know where I was. Oh my God. Do you hear that? No. Wait. Don't look out the window. It'll see. It'll know. It's here. It's trying to slip through the door. It's wailing unintelligible. Of course, the 3 ambulance nurses transporting Case 5 did not report seeing anything unusual except for the unfortunate security guard's own delusional behavior. Although it is true that one of them has not yet reported in for his first shift today. I mention these cases not only as a support for my theory, but also to impress upon anyone who reads this the severity of the situation. So far, recovery from this delusion appears impossible, and death or incapacitation nearly certain, as individuals suffering from it invariably attempts to take their own lives rather than facing the things they believe to be stalking them. I wish I could provide you with more data, but we simply don't have it. I don't want to believe that the government agencies and private organizations, even hospitals, are deliberately suppressing information about this condition, but the evidence before my eyes offers no explanation. Our pleas for resources are stonewalled at every turn. Our cases do not remain communicative long enough to be studied, and even our requests for autopsies are denied. My colleagues who have talked to the media find that their warnings got unreported except by the most extreme fringe journalists, where our desperate call for help appears beside 5G conspiracies, Bigfoot sightings, and MLM ads. With no other resources, I'm sending this warning to those who might believe it. Based on what we've seen so far, these are symptoms to watch for. A persistent feeling of being watched or followed, an irrational fear of peepholes, cracked open doors, nearly closed curtains, dark rooms, and other places where something might hide, a sense of movement just beyond the edge of vision, visual, auditory, olfactory, and tactile hallucinations of a creature or creatures, an unexplained desire to flee, accompanied by feelings of dread and helplessness. These are just a few of the first warning signs. Our observations suggest they can occur in any order, over any length of time. Once these symptoms begin to appear, it is crucial to remember that these are just delusions. The crawling things are not real. This is where I leave you. I wish you the best, and I hope you never have cause to understand my warning. I hope it passes through your life like forgettable gibberish, and you never endure what our patients are enduring now. I did not intend to end this document on a personal note, but I feel I need to post this while I'm still able. There's a skittering sound coming from the kitchen behind me, and the truth is that I'm afraid to turn around.
I need help. Urgently. I don't know how much time I've brought myself. Certainly not enough to just wait this out, because I already tried. That stupid disbelief might end up killing me, but we'll get to that later. I guess starting at the beginning is the best idea. My name is Hannah, and I've not been the best person all my life. Most of my life, actually. You remember that one girl in school? The one who made fun of your family for being poorer than hers? Or made fun of you because of something out of your control, like a scar? Yeah, that's me. My favorite target was this one girl. I think her name might have been Riley. I never bothered to learn her name. I always called her some variant of Shedder or Itchy. Even in my own mind, she suffers from some form of psoriasis, or maybe it was eczema. I never bothered to learn what type. If you had asked me a week ago, I would have said she had a skin disorder. But I know better now. If what she dealt with was anything like what I'm dealing with, it truly was suffering. I bullied her for it, heavily. I made her everyday life a living hell. I can't remember the number of things I smeared onto the itchy, angry, red patches of her skin, trying to figure out which one would make it hurt worse. I called her names and humiliated her in front of everyone she knew. There wasn't any form of torment that I didn't put her through. I don't know why the teachers never stopped me. A failure of the education system, I guess. They could teach me math,
but they couldn't teach me how to be a decent human being. Funny. I bullied that poor girl from kindergarten through high school, until maybe half a year ago. I would have done it for longer. I know I would have, if I had stayed in the state. I didn't. I moved out and headed to college, where I'm currently hiding out in a cheap apartment. The good news about that is my dead body will probably be found when the landlord comes looking for rent, or whenever they find a new tenant. I know this is for me asking for help, not me giving a confession of all the bad things in my life. Trust me, the list would be much longer if I was doing that. I just thought it was important to mention because I think what's happening is connected to me doing that. For all I know, it's some kind of divine punishment for what I've done. Thing is, I don't know what it is, and neither do several doctors I've gone to. All I do know is that I wanted to stop. It started maybe 2 months ago. The first patch was on my hand. It was red, itchy, and irritated from me acting on the urge to scratch at it. It felt horrible, like dry, brittle reptile skin. A rash. That's what I thought it was. Your run-of-the-mill rash. I must have touched something like poison ivy. That's how I reasoned it. I got myself some cream to put on it, and thought that would be the end of it. Needless to say, it wasn't. It spread, and quickly. By the end of the first month, most of my body was covered in that red, itchy skin. I had started my endless trips to the doctor once it began spreading up my arm. I stopped once it consumed 2 of my limbs and half of my torso. What good would it do? None of them knew what it was, and the most any of them could do was give me more cream or lotion to rub on it. Oh god, the lotion. It's the only break I get from the itchiness, from the pain. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It won't make the spots that have flared up stop, or become less irritated. What it will do is make it hurt less and reduce the urge to itch. At first, it was easy to put on. I just had to run it on my arm. Rubbing that shit across your entire body isn't so simple. I go through at least a tube of that stuff a day, and it's not cheap. The itchiness is the worst part of it. It's constant, grating agony. It never stops. It never lets up. Most nights, I barely get any sleep. I was so itchy, I couldn't think of anything else. Couldn't get enough peace to finally fall into the blissful void of sleep. It was one of the 3 things that made it go away for a little while. The second being the previous mentioned lotion. And the third was giving into the urge. It took me until maybe a week ago to figure out the right pressure and intensity of scratching I had to use. If it was too little, it would do nothing but make the itching worse. If it was too much, I'd scratch my skin raw. The rawness of the skin had made putting the lotion on my skin burn like hell. But it still had to be done. I was desperate. I still am. I know, this probably sounds like a normal skin issue. I know it seems like I'm just an unlucky woman who finally got what she deserved. The doctors thought the same thing, even if they didn't know exactly what condition or disorder had finally popped up. They convinced me of the same thing. I'd finally accepted that this was just my life now, and that I'd have to learn to live with it. And then, the peeling started. I thought I had it down. I thought I knew how much pressure and intensity I had to scratch with. No, I knew that I knew how hard I had to scratch. It was my skin that changed, not my actions. I was itchy. I was itchy and wanted to scratch. That was all. So I did. I almost didn't notice that after a moment, my fingernails had turned red. I had scratched my skin off. It flaked and it peeled and it had just come off. It was like pulling a cloth off a table. Just poof. It was on my body one moment and it was gone the next. I freaked out, went to the hospital. They didn't believe that was what happened. According to them, what I claimed happened to the degree it happened wasn't possible. I couldn't have sheared that much skin off just by scratching a little itch. But I did. I haven't gone back to them since. I went to the store and bought as much gauze and bandages and ointment as I could, and I've been holding up in my apartment ever since. Almost every part of my body has some type of bandage on it. Some part of it having been lost, and it's gotten worse. The wounds have slowed healing. They stop bleeding later rather than sooner. It's become easier to lose my skin. Sometimes when I bump against things, it'll just shed off, peel. Typing this hurts like hell. My fingers are bleeding, and I can't feel my fingertips anymore. Only the dull, everlasting pain. My keyboard is going to be a nightmare to clean if I survive this. That's funny, right? Here I am, potentially looking at the cause of my death straight in the face, and all I can think about is my keyboard being dirty. I look and feel like a mummy, but that's not even the worst part. I've had to literally stitch myself back together. My right arm has a band of embroidery thread on it where I tried to stop the skin from falling off. I was desperate, and it paid off. The bad part is that I can't get most of my wounds fast enough to stop it. Even if I could, I don't want to. I almost passed out from the pain, and it took forever. And besides, it's a miserable existence to look and feel like a real-life Frankenstein. I want it to stop. I want it to be over. I don't know why this is happening, but I know it's not normal. I know this isn't supposed to happen, but it is. And I know why. It's because of her. I don't know if it's her directly or some higher power finally giving me what I deserve, but it has to be because of her. Because of what I did to her. Riley, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything I put you through, and I'm sorry it took me so long to finally feel sympathy. I'm sorry this is what it took. It hurts. It hurts so bad. I've lost so much. So much. My skin is a patchwork of red burning rash and red aching wounds. I think I've lost almost half of the top layer of my skin. They've slowly gotten deeper, but still not deep enough to kill me. Just enough to take a little more from me. Day by day, it's taken my skin, my spirit, my joy. Hell, it's even taken my hair, because my scalp isn't immune to whatever is causing me to lose my skin. So I'm begging, if anyone knows how to make the bleeding, the pain, the wounds stop, please tell me what I have to do. I don't care what extent I have to go to. I'll do anything to make it stop. I don't care if you can fix the main problem, or if you can fix the symptoms. Just please make it stop, because none of it has. Even as my skin is literally dropping off my bones like it's fucking paper, I'm still scratching. The itching, it's only gotten worse. I'm so itchy. It's unbearable, and it feels like whatever high power there maybe is laughing at me, because it knows I can't help but give in. It knows that every moment I have to choose. The pain of the flesh ripping from itself, or the pain of my skin begging for release from its pain. It knows that every moment of my life is a waking, breathing nightmare, and it knows that I probably deserve this. It knows that I'm itchy. God, I'm so itchy. I'm going to be straight with you. The problem plaguing my town likely won't ever grace the pages of the New York Times. The minds over at CNN or ABC or whatever other mainstream outlet that gets off on sniffing their own farts will never let the story get any airtime. You won't see a picture of my town as it once was on any popular website. However, what it is becoming and what it is shaping up to be, you might see that sometime in the not too distant future. See, I live in a podunk Appalachian holler. That to the folks who've deemed themselves the arbiters of culture and rectitude is an ugly, ignorant, racist stain on America. Our homes ain't pretty enough. Our yards ain't landscaped enough. Our vehicles ain't eco-friendly enough. Our people ain't diverse enough. Our guns ain't empty enough. And our opinions ain't theirs enough. We're the cousins they're embarrassed to admit they're related to. But when the unsavory layers are peeled away, the core is still human. And what's happening to us, to people, it's damn near biblical. The earth is opening up, swallowing homes and the folks inside, and resealing itself without leaving the faintest hint of anyone having ever lived there. How is that possible? I first realized something was up when Reggie didn't show up to work. We've been friends our whole lives, went to school together, celebrated birthdays together, met up for drinks every Friday night. So when nobody had seen or heard from him by lunchtime on a work day, I took it upon myself to drive over to his place and check on him. Reggie isn't the type to be depressed. The opposite really. Happy-go-lucky even when the clouds are gray. But I'd be lying if I said the thought that he might have harmed himself hadn't crossed my mind. You can never know for sure what kind of inner demons people are struggling with. I rounded a corner, continued past the big oak tree where Reggie and I used to sneak off and smoke cigarettes when we were boys, and then pulled my truck up to a spot that I'd parked 1,000 times before. I could have driven to Reggie's house with my eyes closed, but on that day, I sat idly in my truck, staring at an empty lot where Reggie's house once stood. Maybe I'd gotten so distracted that I'd driven past it, I thought. I shifted the truck into drive and spun the wheel to the left, ready to turn around, when I stopped. The house across the street was the same it's always been, and it had been directly across from Reggie's place, almost perfectly parallel to one another. I put the truck in park and climbed out, then walked across the street to the neighbor's house. I rapped my knuckles against the door and waited for an answer. And before long, the old woman who lived there opened up the front door and asked, "Yes?" "Afternoon, ma'am. Sorry to bother you, but what happened to the house across the street?" The old woman quizzically furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" I stepped aside so she could have a clearer look. "It ain't there anymore." Her mouth fell agape, and she stepped out onto her porch. "What in God's name? Reggie's house is gone." Part of me was relieved to have confirmation that I hadn't gone crazy, but that dissipated quickly now that it was clear that Reggie's house, which had been built on a solid foundation, had somehow vanished without a trace. You never heard nothing? No trucks or tools or... The old woman shook her head. Nothing. It doesn't look like a house was ever even there. How can that be? I don't know. What about Reggie? Have you seen him today? No. You know what? The old woman turned and stepped back into the house. I'm gonna call 911. Come on in. You go ahead. I'm going to see if there's anything left on the ground. I'd be careful walking around over there if I were you. Something ain't right. I nodded and continued towards where Reggie's house had been while his neighbor disappeared inside to make the call. I lingered on the street a moment, searching the lot from a distance, then carefully stepped closer and tapped the yard with the tip of my boot. Confident that the ground was solid, I committed both feet to the grass and began prodding the lot for clues. There wasn't a brick to be found. Not a screw or board or any material that I could find. It really was as if nobody had ever lived there before. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone and held it over my ear as I attempted to call Reggie once more. And just like the other times, it went straight to voicemail. I waited for the beep. Hey Reggie, mighty worried about you. I'm at your, where your house is gone. And, I don't really understand how that's possible. But, give me a call if you get this. Okay? Bye. I returned the phone to my pocket and sighed. They ain't answering. I turned around to see the old woman standing in the doorway with her phone held to her ear. What? I asked. The dispatchers ain't answering. I started making my way back toward her when all of a sudden, her home sunk about a foot into the ground. Dust puffed up from the foundation as wind chimes dangling above the front porch clamorously rang, drowning out the old woman's cries as she stumbled and fell backward into the house. I froze, untrusting of the earth beneath my feet. The old woman struggled to get back up. Her mouth was moving, but I could hear only the sound of bells. As they gradually became quieter, her cries for help took the lead as she continued to try to push herself to her feet. I snapped back to reality and yelled, "Hold on," as I began to hurry across the street. Then, just before I could make the first step onto her property, the earth opened wide and, in an instant, swallowed the whole house. I slid to a stop inches from a steep drop and watched the house break apart as it plummeted toward a distant sea of flame. Then, like a wound having rapidly healed, the earth closed back up, leaving behind no trace of the house whose porch I had been standing on only minutes prior. In the time since that happened, half the town has been devoured by the earth. The police station is gone, as is the fire station. All local government buildings are as if they never were, as are so many homes and businesses. Those of us still living have tried to leave, but the earth has opened up around us and has remained that way. The gap is too large to cross any way other than by air, but the few helicopters the town had have all vanished, and this region is too mountainous for planes. There seems to be an intelligence behind all of this, as the hasty removal of all local government and means to escape must be deliberated. But at the same time, there is a randomness as well, when you consider Reggie and his neighbor and so many others. We've contacted the outside authorities for help and have received only silence. Same with the media. We can reach them, as we can you. You are proof that we can contact the outside. Please help us. In the meantime, we wait on uncertain ground. I have no idea how long he has been appearing in my room. My earliest memory of him was when I was about 8 and waking up to see him standing in the corner of my room. I began screaming my head off, and my parents and siblings came running in and switched on the light. I pointed in his direction, but they all looked so confused and claimed there was nothing there. He suddenly just vanished out of sight, and I was left shaking and crying. My parents assumed it was just a nightmare and let me sleep with them that night. He has been appearing in my room every night since then. Most nights, I sleep through the night, but I always have really bad nightmares for a few minutes each night. I woke up one night and saw him once again standing there. I turned on the light to get a better look at him. He was wearing a black 3-piece suit that looked like it had seen better days. A few of the buttons were missing and it hung awkwardly on him, as if he was wearing someone else's suit. His face was completely blank with no way to determine what he had once looked like. His hair was black that was starting to get speckled with a few grays. I know it seems crazy, but it felt like he was studying me while I was doing the same. He once again just disappeared. There was no flash of light or anything like that, as he just wasn't there 1 second. I went back to sleep and wondered what he was and if I was afraid. The next day, I was telling my 2 best friends, Chloe and Hannah, about him. The 3 of us were inseparable, and we were regarded as the 3 Musketeers. All of our classmates used to joke that we were joined at the hip. Our parents ended up becoming good friends as we spent so much time at each other's houses. Neither of them believed me about him and demanded to stay the night. I was hesitant at first, but reluctantly agreed to keep them happy. We were all so excited and could barely sleep that night. My alarm went off at 3 a.m. and we sat there with giddy expressions on our faces. I watched as the faceless man once again materialized in the corner of the room. His appearance looked different tonight, as there was a red glowing hole on his face, and it always used to be expressionless. I was staring initially at it when I felt Hannah's arm try to grab onto me. She had a look of pure horror on her face as something was dragging her off the bed. Chloe was already on the floor, and I could see her nails digging into the floorboards as she desperately tried to stop herself. The glowing hole on the faceless man's face increased in size and was now the size of a football. Both Hannah and Chloe were now on the floor and being forced towards the faceless man. He lowered his head to the ground, and I watched the expressions of fear and pleading as my 2 best friends were swallowed up by the faceless man. He rose to his feet and then vanished out of sight. I sat there silently for a few seconds, processing what had happened, and then began screaming my head off. My parents came running into my room, and I explained to them what had just happened. They looked at me like I had 2 heads and told me that I have never had any friends called Hannah and Chloe. The next morning, I went over to their houses and talked to both of their parents. They claimed that they never had any children by that name. I pointed out pictures of them on the wall, and they couldn't explain why they had them up. Chloe's mother started weeping, and she begged me to leave as I was upsetting her. I returned to school the next week, and it was horrible. Everyone was making fun of me and calling me a loser for never having any friends. No one could remember my 2 best friends, even though they had known them for years. We moved out of that house the next year, and the faceless man came with us. I swore to myself that I would not let anyone else be harmed by him. I instituted rules with any of my future boyfriends that they are not allowed to spend the night with me. It ended up in a few breakups, but I wanted to keep them safe. the faceless man would still appear every night at the exact same time. My husband is okay with these rules. We live in a 2-bedroom house and he spends the night in the spare room. He knows I love him, so he does it to keep me happy. I was awoken to agonizing pain through my body and looked up to see the faceless man standing there with the glowing hole once again on his face. I looked around in confusion as my husband was away for the weekend. I let out a scream of pain as my insides felt like they were being torn apart. I looked down between my legs and saw a little hand coming out of me. The pain was unbearable and I was desperately trying not to pass out as I watched my twin sons being born. I only got to see them for a few moments as they were ripped out of me and consumed by the faceless man. I lay there covered in blood and felt the tears of anguish running down my face. I had only been 7 months pregnant and had never thought he would take them if they were still inside me. My husband and I broke up not long afterwards, as he couldn't understand why I suddenly decided I wanted to become child-free. It was the hardest decision of my life, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I now live alone and wait up every night to see the faceless man and wonder if someday he will decide to take me. Shout out to my superfans, Sweet Black Swan, Tacey, and Brooklyn. I really appreciate you guys supporting my channel, and I really look forward to making more content for everyone.